Hey guys, welcome to the Christian Idiot Podcast. Today we are talking about a variety of things like always. We go from authority. Did God appoint every single person that's been in authority since the beginning of time? You know, was Hitler appointed by God? Was Mao? Were some of these other terrible dictators, were they all appointed by God? Was that all part of his plan? And we also cover prayer. Does your prayer matter? Does sometimes it feel like you're just talking to the wall? Or is it actually getting to God? And is it effective? If God's sovereign and has everything determined, then do our prayers really matter? We talk about that and a whole lot of other things. Hope you enjoy it. So as we're talking about prayer, and as we're going to go through some of these things, just show me the account where God says that, he appoints all leaders. Mm-hmm. I'll wait. Should we have some silence?
Well, Romans 13.
Okay, read it.
For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves.
Okay.
And that's all about citizenship. So that chapter, or that part of the letter, when Paul wrote it, he's saying, how do we function with these governments? Why shouldn't we just revolt against all these? And he's talking about Roman rule, just pretty bad stuff. And
stuff.
And if you oppose it, you're going to get the worst torture and, discipline and whatever.
Where am I going to go? Where's the first place I'm going to go with that? Nazi rule, right? Uh-huh. And what did a lot of the people that carried out some of the worst crimes in humanity during that time were saying? It's basically saying, like, I'm paraphrasing, it's just business, right? It's not that I actually want to do this, I'm being forced to do it. That was like some of the justification for why they carried out some of the crazy things that they carried out during that time. So you're telling me that God appointed Hitler, he appointed Mao, he appointed, look at like all the dictators that we have in the world right now that are responsible for tens of millions of deaths in this world. Right. You're saying submitting to that authority is what is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, and then there's that movie Bonhoeffer that's coming out, and that's an interesting take on that. And then he was plotting the assassination of Hitler and all that.
But is that what you think? Do you really think so all those people that were in authority and power, those were all appointed by God?
I think it was allowed by God. And it's a super hard question because...
But the answer is no. They weren't. They can't, they're not God appointed. Like God's going, like, if you take certain people's, biblical perspective of views is that we're ultimately looking for one Antichrist, right? The Revelation Antichrist. Mm-hmm. But in reality, we've seen multiple Antichrists throughout the history of time, right? Like we can go back to, let's just say Nero, like they go way before that even, but I mean, so we can go in different countries, we can go in different eras, and we've had these they've been antichrists. The reason why I go to Nero is, right, we know that he dipped Christians in tar to light his, festivals or whatever it might be. Yep. And some of the most, mass crucifixions in the Pax Romana, I think was under him. Maybe I'm wrong. But that would be an antichrist. Mm-hmm. And so we've had these, so God appointed an antichrist? God appointed someone anti-him?
I mean, think about what Paul was saying. I mean, it was so radical. Because people are basically saying, like, the churches are looking to him to say, like, how should we function under these leaders? And so Paul's saying this is the kind of etiquette to have, and know that they wield the sword, not for nothing. Like they will wield that sword and they will take out, and God is working through that in a particular way. And so submit to them, but at the same time, like you not everything is contained in just a few passages, right? So we have to look at, okay, what did Daniel do? Daniel was told not to pray, but he still did it, and he did it in such a way where he, faced the window or whatever he did where it could actually be heard, and he made sure that he prayed multiple times during the day and did that. That was a revolt. But he didn't also say, I'm going to lead an uprising against this evil, tyrannical government or whatever, because then he's getting caught up in something else. So Paul is always this thing of saying, in order for us to get the mission accomplished, we need to understand what our battles are. Pick your battles wisely, and also understand that I think this is the big one. I think it's the appointed can be kind of a broad, elastic word. What does appointed mean? Does that mean that God said, I'm specifically taking a Mao or a Pol Pot or a Hitler or whatever, and because they're going to help bring about my kingdom, and I appreciate their characteristics and all they're going to do, I'm specifically, meticulously going to put them into power? Or is it more of saying they're appointed in the sense that I'm allowing this to take place, and that the kingdom is going to thrive under persecution. It's going to do what it needs to do, even in spite of these leaders, or maybe even because of them. And so there's an appointing that takes place that might be more of like, I'm allowing this to take place, as opposed to, this is my character and I'm all for a Hitler or whatever. So that's a very tricky question. But like, Paul is challenging us, because he's saying, he doesn't say some leaders. I mean, he says he appoints all authority. There's no authority. It's an absolute. There's no authority except from God. And the authorities that exist, and he's specifically talking about governmental stuff in that passage. It's very, very contextual right there with governments. The authorities that exist are appointed by God. Sorry, guys. Like, that's the deal.
Okay, so I'm not giving you that. I'll come back to that in a second. Yeah. So then we look at all the other underground churches. Like, let's look at the underground church in China, for instance.
Yeah.
The underground church in China is basically opposing the authority that God appointed. Mm-hmm. So how are you not out of bounds to say God appointed that person, God appointed Hitler, God appointed all these people that are having this terrible persecution of people he created in his image, right? It's so antithetical, it's mind-boggling to me. Is the fact that if we're humans created in God's image and set here for his purpose, then you have a tyrannical God, right? I just created you to destroy you because I am God. And so then it's like, how do you wrestle with that with all the other passages that we see so many Christians fall after, like Jeremiah 29:11, or I know we've had our way on that, but my point is it kind of it destroys itself a little bit. So for one, if all these dictators are appointed by God to destroy his creation for the furthering of his kingdom, but Jesus loves you and you matter and you're important and like, wait, what? Yep. And then under that rule, don't oppose it because you're opposing the authority that God put in place. That's not what Jesus said. I think Jesus said, hold on one second. Jesus said, render to Caesar's what Caesar's, and then my will above all will. Jesus did not surrender to any authority when he walked on this earth. He willingly gave himself as a sacrifice for us. The authority that was given, I mean, is that not the Pharisees? Is that not like the people that like he didn't? It wasn't like this, like, oh, you're in authority and I'm, you know what I mean? Like, he still went and preached the gospel when they asked him not to, when they told him, be careful, or when they knew that they were trying to plot to kill them and all that kind of stuff. He kind of pushed the system.
Yeah. He was subversive, but he was also led to the slaughter like a lamb. And so he did surrender. In a lot of ways, like when they came to arrest him.
But he ultimately wouldn't have been in that position had he not give resistance to what they're doing.
And I think that's the key thing is when Paul says that, and again, we're putting a lot on Paul right now, but we have to bring in the other passages, say, okay, like, so what does submission to the authorities mean? And is it all encompassing? Because if a centurion came to me, or a Roman government official or whatever said to me, you must not pray, am I going to stop praying? Of course I'm not going to. So you choose how you're going to be subversive but you don't do it in the sense that I'm going to try to overthrow the government because the government is evil and wicked. I think that's Paul's intent. This is to say, the subversive nature of the kingdom of turning everything upside down is not going to come by way of what people thought it was going to be with the gladiator victor or the victor king that they were looking for, the Messiah that was going to put Israel back on top. And he's trying to get away from that mentality, say, you don't understand this king. Like this king rules from a power under as opposed to power over. It doesn't do it in a governmental fashion. So don't trifle with or concern yourself with trying to overthrow or be subversive against everything that Rome is doing to you, because you're going to ruin your witness. This is like absolutely perfect conversation for what Christians have done with Trump. I think it's absolutely perfect. Like, who can we bring in that's going to have the big sledgehammer that's going to crush our opposition? And that's the way we're going to legislate the kingdom of God. And Paul is saying, hey, don't have that mentality. Like, vote who you want to vote for and desire the kind of government you want to desire, but recognize, do not get caught up in the stuff that's going to get you in jail or get your head cut off or get you crucified or whatever it might be. I know there's some play with that one because like he and others ended up dying for the faith, but don't needlessly die because you got caught up in this. Remember when Paul was brought before the courts and whatever, he appealed to his Roman citizenship to get him off the hook at one point. Now, this is the guy that was given 40 lashes minus one 5 times or whatever, and was stoned and was, and dead and brought back to life. He went through some stuff, but he also said, but I'm also going to appeal to my Roman citizenship right now so that I can continue to preach and do what I need to do. So he wasn't all about, I'm just going to subvert. He was like, I'm going to make sure I don't get caught up in the game. I'm not going to get caught up in this particular thing.
But that's like great message. Yeah. I love it. Like that was like, yeah, you're right. I'm there. But where I'm not is it's kind of like evading the original question of all authority
is appointed
to me. If I appoint you CEO of this podcast, well, then you're the CEO of the podcast.
Yeah.
Appointed by, I'm some kind of authority. Let's just say I am.
Yeah.
Right? I've appointed you. That's what maybe we need to do maybe a bigger, deeper dive, or there's maybe some historical thing that we may or may not be missing. Mm-hmm. But I can't get with I hear it so often. I hear it with so many Christians, and I think it's played wrong in our minds that, well, they're all appointed by God. No, I don't think so. When I hear that, this is what I hear.
Yeah.
And this is what I think. I think there are people in positions of power that may be Christians and may not be Christians. Treat them the same in the way that you would pray for them. If they're not Christians and they're dipping Christians in tar and lighting them on fire for their festivals, well, just like anybody else, they need to come to the realization of who God is and come in to surrender to him. Yeah. So pray for that. Mm-hmm. Render to Caesar what Caesar is, just like Jesus said. So pay your taxes, do all your due diligence of what they're requiring you to do, but understand that I come first, my kingdom comes first, and even like if it matters to your death, that's fine, because I've created eternity and I've created a place for you to come. And so when I hear that verse, that's what I hear. I hear like, we don't need to sit and be bombarded and burdened with all the authoritative figures that come up in our life, whether they seem good or whether they seem evil, or they are good or they are evil. Is that this is the posture that you should have in this, and I think Jesus handled that perfectly. And so I think that those are the authorities that are in our position that we are technically under. But I can't get with tens of millions of people playing God, killing the image of God for their own glory, and God going, yeah, I did that. Yeah, that was all part of my master plan, was to have these guys,
I understand,
come into power.
Yeah, I understand.
Or is it because of certain disobedience, because of our lack of, let's just, because obviously today I know we just spent the last like 10 or 15 minutes on something, kind of it, but maybe it's the lack of prayer of his people. Maybe it's the people that aren't connected with him anymore that got you to this point. When we talk about the masses, right? There's a certain way that I needed you to be, a certain way that I needed you to walk, a certain way I needed you to be in tune with me, and you weren't. Mm-hmm. And this is who rises to power in those positions all across the world, not just in one particular area, but like when you think of like world wars, that means that leaders around the world allowed something to get out of hand. Mm-hmm. And they allowed it to get out of hand so far where we had to have the whole world interact. It's like we saw at World War I, we're seeing in World War II. And right now, I'm not some conspiracy theory, but we look like we're out of control as a world. Difference is that we can see how out of control every place is. We can see like, right where we see that guy we were just talking about in Ireland that gets arrested standing up for what he believes in. Yeah. So now we see all those types of things. So are we back to that? Yeah. Did we ever stray away from that? I don't know.
Well, okay, so, and this is where it gets very tricky, but I think this plays well into our topic of prayer, is what kind of influence we have, especially when, if there's some appointing going on, and God has certain things in place for reasons. So, like, and here's a passage, right? This Acts 17:26, okay, where he says, and let me go to the version I want here. Well,
you go to the Message.
No, yeah, right. No, like NASB, NIV, it doesn't matter. Like all of them are saying the same thing here. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation. Okay. Well, that apparently means leaders, Ryan McGinnis, myself, everybody, like, is appointed. Is it okay that I said your real last name? Because I know you have like a special, like a stage name that you like to.
Right, I usually, yeah.
So, Dr. Ryan McGinnis.
I go off of like, I usually do first, middle, last name.
Oh, yeah.
That's, you're trying to do one of those 3-part name things. Thought that one could take off.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And you took on your wife's last name too, which I thought that was really cool.
For sure.
Anyway,
I think it's good.
So anyway, he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation. He did it. He determined their appointed times. And this was not some rogue Old Testament passage that we say, well, that's, who said that? This is the New Testament church. And this is where the apostles are teaching people about how God functions.
What was it? Acts what?
Acts 17:26.
Okay.
Yeah. And appointed is used over and over again. That particular word. Determined, appointed. So there's that thing of saying like, yeah, he's pretty sovereign. Like there's play in this thing, and what is our part as a prayer? But he also knows, like, I've appointed for this particular time. I know what I'm doing, and I think even more important than that is to say, instead of us getting caught up in like, they were appointed by God, what does that mean? How could he allow that? And that's so frustrating. I'm mad. Well, what kind of God would do that? I think the onus is on us to say, how will you function in the face of that? How will you act when you are under a government like that? How will you be? Like, who do you trust when everything is falling apart? Are you trusting your government? Are you trusting your bank account? Are you trusting, your personality strengths or whatever is going to get you through everything? Who do you trust in the midst of that? And instead of getting caught up in like, well, did he really appoint this or not? Well, either way, he allowed it. And he didn't have to, but he did.
Yeah, but that's different. Allowing, because there's a lot of allowing, I think. Mm-hmm. And that's
appointing is strong. Appointed is
a strong word. And I wonder, like, if you could sit down with the disciples and have that conversation, how would they unpack that? Because if you go in verse 27, it says his purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us.
Yeah, I love that. For
in him we live and move and exist. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring.
Mm-hmm. That's Paul talking.
Right.
Again. Yeah.
So but his purpose was for the nations to seek after God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ultimately, like, that's the thing.
So
he wants everybody to seek him and find him. Behold, I knock. You can answer the door or not.
Yeah. But
that's his thing.
All the way to Revelation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that Revelation 4:20? I don't even know.
Not sure.
Maybe I said 4:20.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, all right. So then that begs a whole nother question. So I don't know if we ever even came to a solve. I personally don't. I believe that God allows things to happen, and He allows things to play out in certain areas. And some of it, although it be really good, some of it be absolutely horrific and terrible. And part of that, I think, is the design, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, and I know it seems like a deist point of view, where it's just like, well, everything will just happen the way it's happened. But I do feel like, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, that God has set things in motion in a certain way. Like I've set these guardrails and boundaries for my creation to live in, and then it's kind of up to them on how they want to do it. Now, it's not what I would choose for them. That's not what I would want. And in the same way that we raise our children, hopefully you're out there and you're raising your children in a manner that when they become independent, they are not just great to society, but you're thinking of their eternal purpose, right? Like eternally what's going to happen to them. And if they follow our, let's say, playbook, our rule book, or whatever it is from what we've experienced in life, they'll probably have less aggravation, strife, problems, however you want to put it, if they followed, but they're not going to. And we know they're not going to follow every single thing that we tell them to do to avoid certain problems or issues. Like, hey, if you just handle the situation this way, everything will be better for you on the other end. Because I've been there, I know how this thing plays out. I mean, how many times have your parents told you to do something and you're like, well, that's stupid. They don't get it. They don't understand. That might have been fine for like the 1950s, but come on, we're, in this day and age, it doesn't work anymore. But no, they were right. Like, had I handled it in that situation, I'd have been fine. So in the same way, I feel like God sets a lot of things up in a way of like, hey, I have a playbook for you, right? Our Bible, and say, this is how I would like you to live. This is how I'd want you to, but I know you're going to screw up. I know you're going to make some mistakes along the way. And some of them terrible, and some of them maybe not so terrible. So it's like, I don't know, but I guess my point in saying all that is like, how much of this, or a question that I have, how much of this is set up that way, where it's just like, I set these guardrails and parameters up that I want you to live in, and it's up to you on whether you're going to live in them or not. And if you don't, probably destruction on some form or level is going to happen, and maybe all the way to hell. Or if you do, then I think it doesn't mean that you're going to have a great, perfect, problem-free life. But I'm walking with you because you're in faith with what I'm doing. So how much of the world is set up like that? So it's not like Hitler, Mao, and I know I keep going back to those guys. I can't think of. I mean, there's Stalin. There's so many of them. I just like it to say no. 100%. They were. Before the beginning of time, he said Adolf Hitler, leader. He's going to kill tens of millions of people. Okay with that. Check. This guy going to kill 20 million people. Check. Just like, I don't even know if you saw this, there's a guy in Chicago, 5:30 in the morning, on a train, 3 people are sleeping, and he goes in and executes them in their sleep.
Homeless people or something.
So, like... So there's in some weird way, right? These people are evil. Like, right, the dictators are evil. This guy that walked through the train are evil. But he walked into that train on some level of authority. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wasn't a leader. He wasn't like a world leader or something. But, you know, when you come in and you do something like that, you're choosing a path of whose authority are you under. I don't think that was God appointed.
So I think that, right, I agree. And so you have that kind of parameters that you said. So there's kind of boundaries to that. And there's a whole lot that can happen within that, which, by the way, I think that that's the case. I don't go all the way with you probably as far as you'd go on that one, but I think that that's true. There's that thing of saying we have free will, we have our free will agents, and then he gives us this measure of freedom within that says and then says, what are you going to do with that? Here's your responsibility. Here's your human responsibility. Will you choose light and life and the path of love, not just like squishy love that, you know, you do you, but Christ's love, agape love, all that. Okay. And then you have a spiritual realm where you have free agents that are also, to some degree, unrestrained. There's an overall restraint that happens because God is in control, even if people say, what does that mean? You know, is it meticulous control? Is every bit of the atmosphere, you know, this little dust particle right there, is he controlling that? Which is like superlapsarianism or something they call. And then, or is it more of like, it's a broad control, it's an overarching control, it's a structural control kind of thing. Okay, so the spiritual realm has that going on as well. So there's forces opposing the will of God in particular ways all the time. And there's things that happen within that he is allowing. So I believe that. But the problem is that if he just gave us all the thing and said, I set this in motion, and this is where we get dangerously deistic, right? Where we just start like, which a lot of the founding fathers were. You wind up the thing. He puts the clock. Yeah, he's the watchmaker or whatever. He winds up the clock. He sets it in motion. His hands off. Yeah. And I know you're not saying that, but we get dangerously, I think, close to that if we just say like he sets it in motion. He sees what we're going to do. He gives us this freedom within that. But the thing is that he's always working things towards an end. That's why we have eschatology, right? Where it says, guys, just so you know, the book of Revelation reveals it, Daniel reveals it, tons of the major and minor prophets reveal it. They tell us what's going to happen in the end times. The letters, New Testament. Hey, this is going to happen. And he's working all things toward that end right now. He's going to have and be issuing more control within that than we probably think, instead of just setting it in motion, putting it on humans. Because if he only did that, we might be floundering for millennia after millennia because it never happens. So I think that there is more intrusion into the world, more things taking place than we realize on a sovereign level. That's where I lean.
Unpack that a little. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that he's always using humans to advance his kingdom, and he's always saying, I'm going to bring about my kingdom and the love of Christ through other people. I'm using human agents to do it. But you are like Lazarus in the tomb unless I light you up and give you my spirit in order to actually change the affections of your heart and give you a compass so that you actually start doing something that equates to more than filthy rags or whatever. And which, by the way, when we're redeemed by God, I don't think it's filthy rags anymore. I think now that our works count towards something, and we accrue rewards with that. We bring about kingdom advancement, all that. But the thing is that it's so dependent on his Holy Spirit in order for us to do anything worthwhile. And that's where I lean more sovereign. I'm not a 5-point Calvinist, but I lean more towards like If you just
when
left
you
it
say
up,
sovereign, because there might be people that don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we talk in that way. Unpack sovereign.
well, sovereign is if something is sovereign, you think of a sovereign nation, right? And if something's
I don't
sovereign
think people
nation,
understand what a sovereign nation is.
okay, they've heard it maybe.
Sure, yeah.
And if
I think a lot of people
read.
heard the term.
Yeah.
But Christian idiot.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unpack it for me.
Well, sovereign nation would be like, we are fully autonomous on our own. We don't need any outside help at all. We issue our own rules and laws, and we have enough resource to be able to thrive and survive on our own. You have a sovereign God. He is not dependent on anybody or anything. And he's a triune God, so that he's been in relationship, in a loving relationship, in a dance, so to speak, from all eternity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, sovereign unto himself, doesn't need anything. And Aquinas, the unmoved mover, Aquinas theorized about all that sort of thing. Okay, so sovereign in that particular way where he is all powerful. So he puts creation into existence. The fall happens. Then he says, what am I going to do about this? I'm going to make it a whether or not he had this in mind before it happened or not, that's debatable, but I'm going to make a restoration project out of this because of what happened with Adam and Eve. And I'm going to teach all humanity what it means to be in communion with me, reliant on me, walking with me, and united to me. And I'm going to do it by reversing the curse, bringing about restoration, and bringing about my plans. I'm doing it absolutely sovereignly because you wouldn't have a chance without me right now. Not only did I give you the ruach, the breath of life in your lungs, but I've given you a chance to be redeemed and saved. And then ultimately it comes through in its fullness in Christ when he died on the cross for us, making a way for us. So I just think there's a lot of sovereignty. There's a lot of unilaterality, if that's a word, happening with God. He's this power that's going forth that we are so utterly helpless without.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to me. It's not strong enough for me to just say, he set this thing, he rolled it in motion, said, we'll see what happens. Hopefully they turn to me. They may never turn to you, man. Right? I'm not being disrespectful to God, but hopefully.
Well, he knows that. I mean, he's not stupid. But sovereign doesn't mean unmoved. Right? So I know you talked about movable, immovable, that type of thing where you touched on it. But do you think that God, and this goes to prayer, this conversation that we had earlier, can God be moved by prayer? Sovereign, right, being hey, he's in control, doesn't need any outside help, get that.
Yeah.
But can be moved. Can his mind be changed through prayer?
Yeah, right.
And we look at, there's a lot of, mostly Old Testament. You see in New Testament, it's more we hear faith, and then Old Testament, we hear prayer. But they kind of go hand in hand, and I guess in my opinion anyways. But when you look at, and we talked about this before, but Hezekiah, obviously we talk about Moses. We talk about people that have come before the Lord, pleaded their case. God had one Nineveh with Jonah. Mm-hmm. Go tell these people to repent. And if they do, then I'll spare them. And they repented, and obviously he spared them. Hezekiah they said, get your affairs in order. You're going to die. Pleaded with God. Listen, I've been really kind of a guy after your own heart my whole entire life. Can you spare me? He gave him another 15 years and restored the city.
Amazing.
Right. So we see all these times where God has something in mind, or even when Jesus says, the centurion, I haven't seen faith like this. So, right. Mm-hmm. The healing takes place. Yeah. And so you see all these types of things. So to me, which I think is an awesome,
which by the way,
amazing.
He told a Roman that I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel.
Right.
That's a major shot at all of Israel. If they're saying, really? And you're telling a Roman that?
Right.
A centurion? Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. And so, but that's where this to me becomes one of the reasons for prayer. There's many reasons for prayer. Yeah. So I shouldn't say the reason. But there are times I feel like there's so many like Christians and non-believers out there that think that, and we've been, because we've been Christians for so long, it just seems like our talk, like God's this big dictator God that only created you to destroy you because he is God. But you don't see that throughout the Bible. And that's kind of like where when I read these verses, like these people were appointed, it makes him seem like that. Like he is this God to say, listen, this is how it is. This is how it's going to be. And you have no say in every decision that I've ever made. And I think how I see God is I'll allow things. And I'm not this big dictator that needs to control every single aspect of everything that happens, but you can come to me.
Yeah.
And not only can you come to me, I desire for that to happen in your heart, that you're coming to me with everything. I know we joke around like if you lose your pencil or lost your wallet, and we even had some things that we could even talk about that happened today in our little piece that we're missing from the camera where, I'll bring Zach into it. Zach's our engineer, and he missed a piece, and he didn't know where it was, and he prayed about it, and God showed him right where it was. That type of stuff is really cool, and I think like the Holy Spirit is another one that we have to, bring into play, because I feel like, in prayer, faith, Holy Spirit, I think the Holy Spirit, right, acts on our behalf in some of those certain situations. Things that seem silly, like, really, do you think that happened? Yeah, I actually do. I think like, had I not prayed that prayer, Zach might have been searching. When I lost my wallet and God showed me where it was, maybe I would have still found it, but I had been looking everywhere. It was like the prayer was my last result. It was what should have been my first thing I did.
Yeah.
But I remember that, like where I lost my wallet, destroyed my house. Every drawer. Did my kids take it? Did I, where could this possibly be? And I sat and prayed. And right in that moment, it was like, check your glove box.
Wow.
So it's not, stupid, right? And people might laugh and be like that. But I feel like that was like a little gift.
Yeah.
Like, hey, before he destroyed your house, had you prayed for me the first time? And maybe that happened to Zach. Maybe he had to destroy his house looking for this little piece. He did it the right way, where he's like, I'll pray about this thing first.
Yeah.
Not destroy my house. And then he got it and came here. But I think that's one of the missing pieces, if there's anybody out there that think God's like this big dictator that was like, well, might as well not pray about anything because God's got everything figured out and it doesn't even matter if I pray or doesn't do anything. We look at, I give you verse after verse after verse after verse. Doesn't mean God's not in control. It doesn't mean that there aren't things that he has that are absolutely settled. And yeah, sometimes you pray for a healing for people and it doesn't happen. And I don't have the answer for all of those types of things. But what I do know is that there's enough biblical evidence. And not only that, there's enough like realistic evidence between big things of people actually getting their healings that I've personally prayed for and seen them healed that were miraculous, that doctors haven't been able to figure out, to something as trivial as this HDMI cord that we dealt with this morning.
Yep.
That's what makes God amazing. And so it's like, if you're feeling that way right now, where it's just like, man, everything's settled, there's no point, I haven't prayed in a really long time, and it doesn't seem like my life's any different. To me, to have that point of view, you're missing on some of the very essence of who God is and what he actually wants to have in a relationship with you while you're on earth and in heaven. And that's where I think we're missing a lot of prayer. We can talk about faith and we can talk about head knowledge and in all these types of things. But one of those things is just like cool little gifts from God to be like, man, how do you care about something like for lack of a better word, something so stupid?
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm the one that put my wallet in the glove box. Sorry, Zach, I'm not trying to say anything bad, but Zach's the one that forgot his cord. You know what I mean? It wasn't anything that was like done to us. It was just our own absent-mindedness or I feel like I'm calling Zach absent-minded. I love this guy, and he does all these great things for us. But you know what I mean? Like, it was bad. It was pretty terrible. I mean, it really set us back a lot. But it was, it's like, that little stupid thing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that does matter. And it brings this, it brings down like this shield of this big, like, I am God. I fall on that side. Like, I don't think God created you to destroy you because he's God. Right. Now he can.
Yeah.
But I think if anybody was going to say that God holds our lives cheap, it's in a way because I know where you're going is so much better than where you are. And so we need to hold our lives cheap in that manner, and having the understanding that God's created a place better than where we are right now, even though we love where we are right now.
Yep.
Like, we love this, all we know. Like, I don't want to die. I love this. My family, my friends. I love doing this podcast, my work. And it all pales in comparison to eternity for those that are in Christ, right? So,
and he revealed, I think what's so awesome about that is he reveals his character through those little things. One of the things that I run into when I've talked to atheists or agnostics, but a lot of atheists and family members who are atheists, they can't fathom a God so big or something like the universe that's so big, and then a God that created that to care about the most minute little things like an HDMI cable or your wallet.
It's a coincidence.
Or whatever.
Total coincidence that you just remembered where it was.
And you can do that to just about everything.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you can, death by 1,000, whatever, you can come up with a million different reasons why to talk yourself out of something. And maybe sometimes it is just simply this, like,
sometimes I think
other reasons why that happened.
Sure.
But the whole thing about what it reveals about him, about caring about these little things, shows that he cares so much more than we realize about us. Not that the thing in and of itself was so important, but the person to which it happened is so important.
Yeah.
Like, man, I care about my son Ryan so much that just for him to be able to relieve his stress and to show him a bit more about my heart for him and to actually have a little fun with this thing too, and to show him, like, hey, you know what? Wasn't that funny? You left it there and you didn't even realize that, whatever. I'm going to do this right now. It reveals his character by him condescending, bringing him to, so he's this massive, huge, transcendent God who put all things in motion, and the voice of the Lord strips the forest bare. The voice of the Lord causes the calves to, causes, what does it say? The calves to be born or whatever. Like, he does that with his voice. You imagine like a forest getting stripped like that, and then calves being born because of like his very voice. He is that big. He's the God that created, all these particular things. He's massive. He put this universe that seems to be expanding at faster rates than any time in history continuously. He does all that, and yet he comes down and says, I care about those little small things, not because the thing itself is significant. You can make, a huge big deal mountain out of a molehill or whatever, but it's you that I care about. And what am I going to reveal to you through that? So come to me with this stuff, like childlike faith, right? If he keeps admonishing us with this thing of saying, look at the children, look at the childlike faith. Well, a child is going to come and say, Daddy, I lost this. Daddy, I'm wondering, what? And I got this really stupid question, but I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you like 17 times in a row, whatever. And he loves that. Come to me, dude. He calls us sheep.
Dang it.
Yeah, right.
Dude,
exactly.
Again?
Yeah, come on, man. You're wearing me out. He calls us sheep, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just at the state fair, right, and we were watching some of these sheep.
How many times did you go this year?
Twice.
Okay.
So it was an off year. It was down.
You usually like 4 or 5 times?
Yeah. I used to go 3 times every year.
Really? 3 times?
Yeah, and I would save up for it. Because, you had to. Because I would graze all day.
Dude, for sure. But especially how you eat. I mean, just like...
I was putting it down.
Pronto pup, cheese on a stick.
Yeah.
That pizza, deep fried ranch or whatever.
Yeah, wash it down with some ranch.
Yeah. Dude,
I know. I'm like...
got like some Sweet Martha's in your back pocket.
Oh, dude, I did go to town. I took it very seriously, but this year, yeah, it was a little different.
Have you ever had? Hang on, I know you got a story to tell, but have you ever had gator on a stick? Have you ever tried that?
Oh yeah,
you have.
Oh yeah, when that first started, I had gator on a stick. Not the one, the big sausage, the gator sausage that looks pretty rough.
Yeah,
but,
I'm good on that.
Yeah,
but the camel is that the worst thing you ever eaten?
One of the worst because it had the the sauce, like it's some weird tartar sauce on there.
But not
Camel
the meat?
burger was tiny. No, it was less than a slider. It was like half of a White Castle. Like it was so small.
Can't believe
and
you
I
ate
paid
that.
$12 for it or whatever. And the guy's like, there you go, sucker.
Right. You don't even know if that was actually camel.
I don't know.
Right. That could have been any kind
was
of
gamey.
like,
It was
look
gamey,
at
though.
these. Yeah. I could have killed a squirrel earlier that morning. And that's why we got that little tiny piece of meat. Sorry. That's just how the camel comes.
Yeah.
Little did you know you ate Elvin. Like that's who you ate on not a camel. Because I mean, wouldn't you think like a camel burger would be like this big fat, like, and what part are you eating? The hump? Are you eating? I mean, what part of the camel?
That's a good point. Yeah,
that was
I have no idea.
pretty courageous. Like to just go in on a.
I felt like a fool after I did it. I don't know about courageous. I mean, like, just because the sauce is courageous, because it was like that was nasty.
It's like sometimes when you see like, never mind. I'll digress. I'll stop there.
for that.
All right, so you're at the state fair talking about sheep. Probably
Sheep
took you
are
totally off.
sheep are hilarious. And
You're
they're
like actual sheep.
yeah, actual sheep.
So you're in the barn.
Yeah, they're hilarious. I mean, they're the silliest, goofy. I mean, like, and they have no hope apart from. I mean, I guess they could survive for a while without a shepherd, but like, they're just silly. They'll faint if you shock them like or whatever, and they'll be like
Yeah,
they'll go down.
Those were goats.
Oh, is it goats that do
I think
that?
they're fainting goats.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing, right? So anyway, sheep are still bad in their own right. They need a lot of help. And God over and over says, you're my sheep. You're not my lions or whatever. We become that, I guess, in some sense, whatever. But we really are so dependent. And the big takeaway, I think, is like prayer puts us in that, reminds us of our dependence. And he says, come to me with everything. Pray in all circumstances, in all situations, whatever the passage is.
You talking about like praying without ceasing?
Pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Have you ever seen it reminds me like when you say sheep, have you ever seen that meme? There's a guy pulling a sheep out of like a, I don't know, little ravine or whatever. It's stuck in there. And you can tell like it took some work to get the sheep out of the spot.
Yeah.
And he like finally gets it free, and the sheep runs this way, comes back around, and goes right back into the ravine. And like I think someone put a meme on there like actual footage of Jesus rescuing me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it was like,
good.
I'm out, I'm free. Oh, I'm going right back in.
That's it. That's it.
Hey, just it's really funny because I know you brought up like, hey, when I talk to atheists and those types of things. Actually, yesterday I looked up, like, do you know what the top 5 reasons? This is a Google search, right? Mm-hmm. Top 5 reasons that atheists don't believe in God. Do you think you could name them?
Well, number 1 would be suffering, right?
Would be what?
Suffering.
Sure,
Like,
sure.
yeah.
I'll give you that. Problem of evil.
Yep.
Sure.
Because the world is the universe is so big, we're so small and insignificant. Why would he care?
Sure, like lack of empirical evidence.
Okay.
Sure, so I'll give you that.
All right.
Religious contradictions is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Psychological and social explanations. And then this would kind of plays into like what we're talking about. Natural expectations for phenomena.
Okay.
So like there's an
big.
explanation for everything that happened, right?
Yeah.
There's a... But I
Which
want
you're
to...
really good at.
What, natural
Like
explanations?
defending that one.
Yeah, maybe because, like, so for instance, some of the things that I think about in this, and I know it's a little off topic, but it gets me like, is God, because God's the ultimate scientist. I really don't like when people say God or science, like they're antithetical from each other.
Right.
What are you kidding me? If we believe, which we believe, that God is the creator of the universe, the heavens and the earth, human beings, everything that you can see, how would you say that God doesn't love science? He is Mr. Science. Like, solve every science equation that you could ever think of with ease. Like, with the best explanation ever. So,
and the reason why science began was because they believed that there was a discernible order and pattern and design behind everything because of the belief they had in place that there was a God who created it and governs it and all that sort of thing, which sort of begat science and scientific exploration.
Yeah, it's I mean, think about how many debates that Christians have had with scientists about science and why. I don't know why. I very rarely ever hear anybody go, "Well, God is the scientist." Like, what do you think? Why do you think it's either or? And sometimes
it's kind of like saying, "Hey, man, I don't believe in God. Why don't you believe in God?" "Oh, because I believe in interior design." And
yeah,
be like, it's a category error. You know, it's like so what?
Yeah,
it's not incompatible. Like, and it doesn't explain anything.
It's mind-boggling to me, and I know like a lot of Christians get mad at the fact that did God know His own creation so well that, and I know some people are like, well, it takes away from the miraculous. I don't think so, but this is me, and this is maybe where like you defend that better. Is like when you look at the plagues, and like would He have known how to use His creation to create the plagues? Doesn't make it any less miraculous to me. Like for instance, like. I can't remember how this is. Go look this up because this isn't like don't take this as gospel, but something where the river turns red like blood, right? As like one of the first plagues. And I know there'd be a lot of theologians who say, well, what's wrong with that is that it actually was blood and da 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 da. Okay, or whatever. Like, but just humor me for a second. That would have driven, like when that happens, like even now, because it still happens, it drives everything that lives in the river and by the river out, right? So if he did this in a certain way, would that have driven frogs out and had the frogs, you know, and then you can look at certain things of like, I just, you know, as I was reading this and maybe I heard it somewhere, I don't know, but like, I just thought, man, I wonder if God knows His creation. Well, He does know His creation so well that He could make these things like, hey, this is child's play for me. You know how easy this, like, that's kind of like how, like when I read those, I'm thinking this is so simple for God to do. Yeah. Could He snap His fingers and make a plague happen? Sure. I'm not discounting that was an actual way that did it, but I just wonder, like, it's like one of the questions I have. I'm like, hey, did you set all these things in motion for these things to happen in the way that they happen? Like, cause you can go through it and it'll be like the river, the frog, you know, like you can go through all the things. And I see, but to me, that's cooler. I don't know. I know for other people, they're like, no, I need it to be like, it was actual blood in the river and then it was actual plague of frogs and da 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 da. I don't know. In some sense, like, that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. If that's, cool. Either way, it's cool. Not cool because of the plagues and all the suffering. That's not cool. But, you know, I think
it's where you're coming from, the reason why you're saying it, right? Because some people would say, I feel much more comfortable if I can strip Jesus of His divinity or God of miraculous powers, because it's much more comfortable to think that He's more like me, and it's so hard to believe in miracles, and it makes me look like a jackass if I believe in miracles in the 21st enlightened century now that I'm in. So I'm going to find out some kind of natural phenomena explanation for why the plagues happened.
Right.
Or the Red Sea parted, is because there was a natural receding that happens because of the tide, you know, whatever, because of the tide or something like that. And that's why Moses and the Israelites could pass through or whatever. And I've heard different things like that. And it always feels like this sort of special pleading and they would say the opposite, but it's like they're basically saying, make me more comfortable because this God of the miraculous is stupid, or it feels credulous, or it feels like you got to put your brain on the shelf in order to embrace that stuff. But as soon as you do it, like Thomas Jefferson, right? You know, the Jefferson Bible strips Jesus of His divinity. There's no virgin birth. There's no resurrection. There's no healing miracles. So you got to kind of question with the God of Thomas Jefferson, who He actually is. It's not Jesus, or at least not the historical Jesus. So, so I think it's the spirit you approach that from. If he furthered His will and did these miraculous events through natural phenomena, but He's the one that still created it and did it, I mean, it still gives him the credit. But I think the point is that we need to, he really wants to convince us that he is the kind of God, and this plays into prayer too, that does the miraculous, that intervenes, that breaks in on the natural order that he set up and does something that upsets the order.
Yeah.
Because we prayed. But if you don't pray, he might still do it. But there's a much better chance that if you do this thing and if you offer it in prayer, or if you're like the persistent widow in Luke chapter 18, it says, I need this, I need this, I need this. The unjust judge finally says, man, to make her stop, I'm going to give it to her. And I think Jesus is saying at that point, it's like, number one, she was persistent. She didn't give up. Don't ever stop praying for what you are praying for, unless I show you and say you're praying for the wrong thing or you're praying out of wrong intentions. But if you believe that this is honestly what you should be praying for, and it's a good thing, persist. I'm going to teach you something through it. I'm going to grow you through it, and I may give it to you as well. If the unjust judge who is unjust gives it to her, how much more the just judge will give to us?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the second component of that. What is that? It's character. I'm showing you who I am through this thing, and I want you to be dependent on me. You know, I want you to be dependent on me, dude. Like, I'm reading through Exodus right now, and he gave manna to them. He gave us a allotted portion daily, like the daily bread. And some of them said, well, I know what Moses said. We're supposed to not store up the manna for tomorrow. And then when they did, what happened? They looked at it and it was rotten and it had, whatever. It was spoiled. Why did he do that? Because he's teaching them something about who he is and the kind of dependence that he wants them to have. Because they're like busy saying, oh my gosh, like, we know what it's like to be in a wilderness. We need this manna. So I know we were commanded here, but I'm going to take my own route here. Got you, God. I know your commandment, but I actually see better than you. And I'm not going to rely on you. I'm going to rely on my own self-sufficiency right now and my own ingenuity. And I'm going to, and then God's like, I'm trying to teach you something.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that plays into like, I feel like what we need to start doing, and like I always say, like I grip the mirror when I say this, is I think that's one of the biggest things that hinders us in what we're seeking, right? There's that Chris Williamson, but it's not his quote. He was quoting someone else, where it's like, the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. And so so for that is what I think is sometimes I'll depend on God when it seems like I really need him. I'm not going to depend on God when things are good. Like when manna's falling from the sky and I'm eating and my stomach's full right now, cool, everything's fine. And then I'll pray to God when the manna's not falling, or I'm going to store this up in a certain way that's different from what God had told me to do, so I can be more self-reliant. It seems like the smart thing to do. And a lot of the times we get in our own way, and I would say not a lot of that, I would say most of the time we get in our own way, and we're human, and we're going to, and I think God can see through some of that. Doesn't mean like, oh, there needs to be all this like self-deprecation where it's like, oh, I've screwed up or I've done these things. But if we can stop releasing or start releasing control and actually step into surrender, our lives are going to go to a whole nother level from a relationship with God, not from a perfect, everything is hunky-dory, I'm not going to have any problems. Like, man, when you become a Christian or you're in this life, you're going to have problems. Like I'm so tired of the gospel saying like, or, the church saying there's too much like of this seeking to get this, like we kind of touched on this off off record of like this manifestation type of God. Name it, claim it. He's here for you, and he wants you to have this. And Jeremiah 29:11, he has a plan for you, but you really don't understand that verse. But I'm going to preach it this way anyways because there's so many people that'll tickle their ears and they'll love Jesus more. When it's just like, hold on a second. There's a lot that you promised, and I think for so many of us, we need to just get back to the basics of like whether you own a business, whether you're a father, a wife, a husband, a child, it doesn't matter. Like whatever position you're in, man, if we could just get really good and every day of like this consistency, you talk about persistence in prayer.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when we talk about persistence in prayer, it's in pursuit of something because that's the example that was set before us. But what if it was just because I always want to be in communication with God? It has nothing to do with the pursuit of one thing. Like I'm really pursuing God for my healing, or I'm really pursuing God for this job or for a spouse or for whatever it might be. But no, I'm just really pursuing God to be in your presence because you're who you say you are and because you created me and because I think the purpose of what we need to get back to is, and maybe some people you don't need to get back to this, but I think for a lot of people, they need to hear this, is like, I want my communication to be with God and my relationship with God to be as close as possible on earth as it will be in heaven. I know there'll be a difference.
Oh, yeah.
But I want it to be as close as I possibly can. But the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. You think you could do too many things on your own. And I think like the church, the Christians, they need to hear this a little bit to say, just like shut the podcast off right now and go in your quiet place.
Not this one, though.
Shut this one off. No, I'm just kidding. Shut this one off.
Yep.
And you just go surrender these aspects of your life. Your persistent prayer is great, but maybe before you do that, you just need to get on your knees and say, what do you want me to do with this?
Yeah.
I just give it to you, and I'll pray with you on these things, not for me. I think there's a difference if we look at what's for me and what's with God. And a lot of the time, it feels like we're just praying for our wishes to come true, our manifestation. I need to have this.
Rub the genie.
Right. No, just get on your knees and be grateful that the God of the universe is even hearing you right now, even when sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And seek that relationship. How much of a relationship can I have with God while I'm here on earth existing?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's so good to see you when you see him.
Yeah. Think about this word. Everything you're saying brought up this thing. I just read this recently. And it was talking about the word abide. And when he says abide in me, and I with you, but abide in me. And he talks about that, I think, in John 15 as well. And I think this has to do also with the fact that, like, whatever you ask, whatever you wish, according to my will, it will be done. There's this idea of saying, and it says in John 15:7, it says, if you remain in me, you can ask whatever you wish and it will be done. So the remaining, I think, is tied to the abiding. And the word abide actually literally means to spend the night sleeping with. I know that can get weird for some people. Be like, "Whoa, what does that mean? That's weird." You're getting all, but think of it in the purest, sweetest way possible. To abide with the Father. Like, the other night, one of my boys couldn't sleep, whatever, like, can I sleep in here? Whatever, it was that thing of like, I know that I can abide here. I find safety. I find comfort. I find connection. So that word abide is a big deal. To spend the night, by the way, sleeping, kind of like Jesus was sleeping on the boat when the waves were crashing all over. And then the disciples are like freaking out. Hey, why aren't you handling this? And then he's like, whoa, why are you so afraid? Don't you know that I'm with you? 100%. Basically, that's what he's saying. Abide in me. You can actually be so much at peace with me, in me, that you could fall asleep right now. As the world is crashing down, what does it say? Psalm 46, God is my refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore I will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam, the mountains quake with their surging. This idea that everything is falling apart, and yet I can sleep in the boat. Yeah. I can abide in you right now. So to what you're saying is that, man, I think this is so massive. It's the best stuff. Is like, I'm going to be so close to Abba, man, and trust this one that he's got me. And like the morning might happen, or the pain remains for the night, but joy comes in the morning. So right now, Lord, I'm in so much pain. I'm so confused. I don't know what's going on. And I don't understand why this is not happening. You didn't answer this prayer. I'm not getting healed or any number of things. But he's like, do you trust me? Like, I got you. Like joy comes in the morning.
Yeah.
I got you. Do you abide in me? Do you abide so close that you could actually fall asleep right now with me right next to me as your loving Father saying, I got you?
Yeah. And for sure. And it's like, and then the timing piece of it too. And like when we think of that, we continue to pray. And I think that's why that consistent abiding might not happen tomorrow, the next day, the next month, the next 6 months, the next year. And we find like, well, I've been praying to God about this thing for so long, but it's all based on your timing. And what is God trying to take you through? I think there's so many times we're seeking the outcome and not seeking the process. Where we're like, okay, what does this mean? What does today mean? How do I actually heal from this thing? And it seems like God's not in control. But the second half of that verse is, apart from me, you can do nothing, right? So abide in me. So it's like, why do we have all these? We continue to have these vain pursuits where it's like, abide in me and all the amazing, glorious things that you just said. And then, oh, by the way, if you don't do that, you might have some victories. You might gain some wealth. You might sleep with different girls or different partners or whatever it might be. And it might seem like you're winning in life and people are going to give you high fives and think you're doing all these great things. But God's really saying you haven't accomplished nothing.
Wow.
Because all this has been apart from me. So whether you're successful in the eyes of the world or successful in the eyes of God, though, the whole point remains the same, is that you need to abide in me, and apart from me, you're really doing nothing. And the people that have the vain pursuits may seem like they're accomplishing worldly things, but really at the end of the day, right, like what you said before, it's filthy rags.
Yeah.
Like all those accomplishments really don't mean anything apart from me.
Yeah.
And I think that's like where we can, it's a slippery slope of getting into our own arrogance in our own mind of like, well, I've done all this, I have all this success. You have nothing, you have none of the success, but you have Jesus. So congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm good on my own, right? In the ways of the world. But that's the point of a lot of the gist of what we're talking about. If you are doing that and you are praying, you are abiding in God, continue to do so, and like, right, I want people to continue to do that. And if you're not, or if you find yourself in that position where it's like, I've been praying for this thing for a long time, keep doing it. And it doesn't always need to have like this outcome that you believe it's happening. What else is God doing? I think that we really need to start asking that and start to realize that, why would you want to do anything separate from God? Regardless if you're successful in whatever ways that we said, like not the sleeping with people, but like the other, like some of these other ways, maybe you have a successful business or anything. Why would you ever want to do that apart from God anyway? And
what would it profit you if you gain the whole world, but you forfeit your soul?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Amen to all that. Great pod. I know it man, this was really fun. This is really good to really understand. I know we went into some different areas, but man, I was really encouraged.
It's good.
Even on some of the like really lame things that you said, I thought were even solid.
I did my best.
I think some people will be encouraged by it. No, not at all. It's great. It's great to have these dialogues. And if you guys are out there and you need some prayer, I don't know, Zach, maybe can we send anything, like maybe have a prayer request? We want to pray for you.
Yeah, we want to know,
how do you feel? Maybe they could put some comments in there on how do you feel about prayer? Are you getting your prayers answered? Does it feel like you're talking to the wall? Does it seem like it's a delusion? Or is God doing something? Let's hear some crazy things. And I'd really love to hear some stories from people about the miraculous things. Even like, how cool would it be if we could have some people in the comments of this podcast where they went, I've had those seemingly dumb things where I've lost a wallet or I didn't have an HDMI. encourage people with those stories.
It's faith building.
They're
it's
fun.
huge. And I love reading it.
If you're listening to this podcast and you got to the end, I'd love to hear some of those comments.
Me too.
I'd love to hear some of those stories of what did God do? Maybe there's some really big ones too. There's some huge healings or things like that. It encourages other believers, encourages us. So put those on there.
Absolutely.
So thanks, man.
That's good.
Good pod.
Awesome.